Hello everyone, 555 here. Today I'm bringing you the first video in a series of Asphalt Legends Unite guide videos aiming to take a deep dive into the game and its complex mechanics. In this video, I'll be explaining the hidden checkpoint system of Asphalt Legends Unite. Let us begin with the most obvious question. Why may you not yet know checkpoints even exist in Asphalt Legends Unite? Well, unlike in other games such as Trackmania, Forza or Need for Speed, checkpoints in Asphalt Legends Unite are invisible to us players. What's more, unlike in the aforementioned games, checkpoints are not simple triggers the player must drive through, but entire sections of the track, which can sometimes last up to several kilometers in length. The respective segment of the map you're currently in is your current checkpoint and stored as an integer representing the rank of your checkpoint. From this point on, you must collect all remaining checkpoints chronologically in order to be allowed to finish the race. Any checkpoint you attempt to activate that is higher than your next checkpoint is ignored. This means you cannot, for instance, collect checkpoint 2, then 4, and come back for 3, and then carry on to 5. Instead, after you collect checkpoint 3, you must again collect 4 as it was not collected previously due to being too high to be claimed. Be careful though, as you can also downgrade your race progress by entering the previous checkpoint area. You will then have to reclaim your current checkpoint later on again. You can downgrade only one checkpoint at a time, however, doing this step by step, you can get back to being at the very first checkpoint. Should you go out of bounds, your checkpoint will remain as it was previously, not decrease nor increase. It is important to note that your displayed distance percentage merely shows you how close to finishing the race you got at some point. It does not reflect your current progress, namely your checkpoint, because distance percentage can never decrease and is purely visual and serves no ulterior purpose within the game. The distance percentage will increase based on the distance to the finish line, as the name already implies, from your current position, so long as the checkpoint segment you are in is also your current checkpoint, or in other words, so long as you did not skip a checkpoint and are in a checkpoint you can't currently claim. After following the checkpoints in chronological order as is intended, the finish line will be made visible to you. Note that the finish line itself is also merely a checkpoint, namely checkpoint 0. Upon claiming checkpoint 0, you will finish the race, assuming it is your final lap of course. The visual finish line you see, however, is not the entire hitbox of checkpoint 0, rather it is just a visual representation of where it begins. Furthermore, the checkpoint in which you spawn at the start of the race is the highest checkpoint of the race, assuming it is a 90-second track. You now may well ask, if you spawn at the highest checkpoint, why don't you finish the lap upon entering the finish line checkpoint 0, which although still not visually displayed, is still existent and you collect next? The answer to this is fairly straightforward. Indeed, you do finish a lap upon passing the still not visibly displayed finish line into checkpoint 0. However, you are still in lap 0, entering into lap 1. In other words, prior to hitting checkpoint 0, aka the finish line, you are not even in the first lap, but in a lap existing before it. For this reason, your progress percentage will also remain at 0% before crossing the finish line of any given 90-second map at the beginning. What's more, if you cross the finish line backwards, by driving from checkpoint 0 back to the highest checkpoint, the game will allow you to downgrade your progress. By driving backwards, you can accumulate an unlimited amount of negative laps. This negative lap count is binding and real. In other words, you must drive an equal amount of positive laps to make up for the negative laps and to be able to continue your race and to finish the race. Your negative lap count will however not be displayed visually on the finish line as you'd usually expect it to, as the finish line only visually spawns in upon hitting a hidden trigger for it, while your lap count is larger than 0. It is currently still unknown if the triggers, like checkpoints, a 3D zone the player enters, or if it is activated if a player is within a certain distance threshold to the finish line. It should also be noted that most maps share checkpoints with other tracks of the same location. Now that you have an understanding of what checkpoints are and how they operate, let us think of ways to abuse the checkpoint system in order to gain some time. And indeed, the uniquely designed checkpoint system in Asphalt Legends Unite has many and severe flaws. First and foremost, the checkpoint hitbox areas are in many cases far too large, extending even outside of the track or onto roads not used in the respective variant. Another flaw to exploit is that many maps have way too few checkpoints. While Pudong Rise, for instance, has a solid 17 checkpoints, Whirlwind Curve possesses only 8 checkpoints, along with numerous cuts. Some Buenos Aires tracks released an even worse state, seemingly having no more than 3 checkpoints, allowing players to finish races in under 10 seconds. Furthermore, the game also does not ensure that you drive the intended route, as you can go out of bounds and re-enter into the next or the current checkpoint segment at any point. The player can even enter a checkpoint from its end. And this is because the game does not punish players for driving through checkpoints that are too high or too low to be claimed. This creates reroute opportunities for us players, possibly making it faster to go out of bounds, to drive through an unclaimable checkpoint, and to enter at the end of the next checkpoint than to drive through the current and next checkpoint as the game intends us to. For instance, a player could be at current checkpoint 3, drive out of bounds and pass checkpoint 4, enter into checkpoint 5, which will be ignored, briefly dip back into checkpoint 4, then turn around and continue through checkpoint 5 as usual. Additionally, the system can be used to enable what we refer to as teleporting. In Asphalt Legends Unite, the game constantly updates your respawn position so long as you are not in the air and are within the checkpoint it expects you to be in, your current checkpoint. The player can abuse this by going out of bounds, entering the next checkpoint area while mid-air, and respawning before landing. The player will still successfully claim the new checkpoint, and his distance percentage will update to reflect this. However, the player will still respawn at his previous location where he went out of bounds in, which could possibly be closer to the finish line. Thus far, however, this technique remains useless, as when the player respawns in his previous checkpoint area, his checkpoint progress is downgraded again, making the gained checkpoint worthless. Last but not least, let us take a look at how this all works out in practice. I'll be showing you several map examples, one of which is uncuttable, while the other allow for multiple shortcuts respectively. First, let us take a look at a so far uncuttable track, namely Pudong Rise. Although there are several places in which players can go out of bounds to potentially skip sections in, each of these ideas is destroyed by the checkpoint placements right away. Let us take a look at the first and most promising cut idea on Pudong Rise, going over the left wall after the first flat ramps onto the Shen City route. Getting over the first wall is doable without too great of a difficulty, the players are able to re-enter the track at a later point seamlessly. The issue, however, is that the player leaves the track within checkpoint 2 and re-enters the map at checkpoint 7. Furthermore, these checkpoints have proper hitboxes and do not get triggered even when driving adjacent to them in the Shen City route. While other cut ideas, such as bouncing upwards onto the upper route at the second float or leaving your track to the left after the fourth float, exist, none of these ideas allow the player to finish the race due to the checkpoint placement, and even if he could finish the race using these routes, they would still be slower. Many other maps and tracks are however not as good designed as Pudong Rise is. Nevada, for example, features many design flaws, namely checkpoints extending out of bounds. The upper bridge and the lower bridge route both share the same checkpoint zones. This is fine on most maps on which both routes can be used. However, on certain tracks such as Dam Buster or the Narrows, this approach is faulty. The upper route, which is generally faster than the lower route, can be used instead. The only thing stopping this from happening is a respawn zone and an invisible wall respectively. However, both of these obstacles are probably surpassable in some way. Osaka, the most recent map to get cut by BWO, features a stunning lack of checkpoints, with one checkpoint covering almost half of the entire map on Kita Run. However, not just Kita Run was cut. Shortcuts are also confirmed to be possible, one refined finish, Mode Finale, and Welcome to Osaka, and probably many other tracks as well. Last but not least, the most egregious example of bad checkpoint design by the developers. Almost every US Midwest track should be cuttable in some way, in theory, but the two best examples to illustrate this are Canyon Launch and Whirlwind Curve. Firstly, let us take a look at Whirlwind Curve. This map features two completely separate shortcuts relying on the same checkpoint placement mistake. In the entire college section exists only one checkpoint, namely checkpoint 3. The shortcut in which the player leaves the track right upon entering checkpoint 3 by jumping onto the train works as the user re-enters the map at checkpoint 4 as shown. The more known cut in which the player drives the track as usual up until 40% and then bounces up onto the bridge makes use of this and yet another mentioned checkpoint design flaw, namely that driving through unclaimable checkpoints is not punished by the game. The player drives through checkpoint 5 without being punished and can therefore claim checkpoint 4 turn around and proceed as usual. Secondly, let us take a look at Canyon Launch. While it has not yet been successfully cut, there is at least one confirmed to be possible cut on it. In order to do the cut, the user must bounce up onto the bridge, drive backwards through checkpoint 4, 3 and then 2 in order to claim checkpoint 1. This approach skips the track from 32 to 68%, saving potentially a second. The funny thing with regards to Canyon Launch, however, is that the finish line checkpoint, checkpoint 0, covers almost half of the entire map, making it in theory possible to finish the race while being at the other side of the entire race, 3 kilometers from the visually displayed finish line. Now, with all that having been said, this is all there is to know about the hidden checkpoints and how they work in Asphalt Legends Unite. Now it's up to you to get creative and abuse the checkpoint system to achieve otherwise impossible records. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe not to miss our upcoming videos similar to this one, in which we'll be explaining other advanced topics such as fake speed and how to calculate fake speed in Asphalt Legends Unite.